New CEO replaced me after 14 years of growth. Then his empire started crashing one client at a time. Before we begin, let me ask you something personal. Have you ever given everything to a company? Your time, your energy, your ideas, and then been told you're no longer needed in under 10 minutes? Not for a mistake, not for misconduct, but simply because someone new thought you were part of the old system. This isn't just about losing a job. It's about losing something you built with your hands and what happens when the ones who never saw you build it tear it down without blinking. It was 9:13 a.m. on a Tuesday when I got the calendar invite subject line, quick sync. That phrase had started showing up a lot since Brandon came in as CEO. The new guy, Harvard grad, suits that probably cost more than my truck. He barely looked old enough to rent a car, let alone run Northrise Apparel. But the board wanted agility, and Brandon was their idea of forward thinking. The meeting room was cold, not physically, emotionally. He didn't shake my hand. He didn't even offer coffee. He just clicked the button on his laptop and began reading from a script. Something about optimizing organizational synergy and recalibrating leadership layers. I sat there listening to jargon I'd heard recycled in every bad management book. Then came the sentence that stuck to my ribs like cold oatmeal. We're restructuring to maximize shareholder value. Your position is being eliminated effective immediately. No explanation. No recognition. No thank you for 14 years of service. Just a head tilt and a clipped nod toward the door. It felt less like a conversation and more like a transaction. A box ticked, a line item erased. I should have been angry, furious even, but I wasn't. I felt hollow, like someone had just unplugged a machine and was still running inside. The silence that followed was the kind that closed my ears. Brandon closed his laptop like he was ending a Zoom call. Just like that, it was over. Security was already waiting outside, not in a threatening way, but firm like they'd done this 100 times. Alicia from HR was there too. She'd been with the company even longer than me, but she couldn't meet my eyes. I didn't blame her. This wasn't her decision. It wasn't even Brandon's, really. This was how companies end chapters, now quick, clean, quiet. As I walked past the open plan floor, I noticed how heads dipped, pretending to focus harder on their screens. No one said a word. Not even Thomas, the CFO, who I'd worked alongside during the rough years. He walked past me, stopped, and for a second, it looked like he wanted to say something. But all he did was pat my shoulder and keep going. When I got to my office, I didn't rush. I looked around and let myself take in the space. The family photo by the monitor, the golf ball from the retreat in Banff, where I sealed the deal with Vector Properties, a handwritten card from Diane at Sunost. Thanks for saving our skin on that last-minute shipment. You're one of a kind. I placed them gently into the cardboard box they gave me, like I was packing up memories, not just items. On my way out, I passed the glass trophy they gave me 3 years ago. Top regional performance, Eastern Division. It still had my name etched into it. Funny how fast accomplishments fade when the ink on your termination letter is still wet. I reached the parking lot. The sun was out, but everything looked washed in gray. I sat in my car box on the passenger seat and stared at the building I had once helped design. 14 years. 14 years of client calls at midnight, missed dinners, staff training weekends, flying out to Edmonton in snowstorms just to close a deal in person. 14 years gone with the stroke of a keyboard. But something shifted in that stillness. For the first time in over a decade, I wasn't carrying the weight of a regional division on my back. No quotas, no late emails, no silent pressure to prove I was still worth my salary. That should have felt freeing, but it didn't. What it felt like was unfinished. Not because I needed revenge, not even validation, but because the people who replaced me didn't understand what I had actually built. Not profits, not charts, but trust. Clients didn't come to us because we had the best prices. They came because they knew me. Because when Suncoast Financial's shipment got stuck at customs, I personally drove a truck across the border to get it there on time. Because when Vector threatened to leave, I took a red-eye just to show up in person. That kind of history doesn't live in spreadsheets. And I realized something else. They didn't just fire me, they fired the relationships, the care, the quiet decisions no one logged, but everyone remembered. And as I drove away, I knew in my gut that was going to matter more than they could ever imagine. Because you don't rebuild trust overnight, and you sure as hell don't replace it with a suit and a slide deck. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I knew I wasn't done, not even close. 3 days passed before my phone rang with a number I recognized, and not one I expected. It was Diane from Sunost Holdings. We'd spoken every month for the last 5 years. I'd helped her land her promotion after coordinating a complex winter logistics job no one else wanted to touch. The moment I answered, her voice came through sharp, urgent, unfiltered. "Clayton, please tell me this is some kind of mistake." I hesitated, but then sighed. "It's not." She was quiet. The kind of quiet that wasn't confused, but furious. "They said you stepped down, voluntarily. That's what Brandon told us in the quarterly update." I closed my eyes. There it was already rewriting the story. "I didn't step down," I said. "I was let go. No warning, no discussion." I could hear her breath catch. She swore under her breath, then asked the question I hadn't let myself think about. Did they even ask how we'd react? Of course they didn't. But Diane wasn't the only one. That same afternoon, I got a voicemail from Mike at Vector Properties, another key account I'd nurtured since their expansion into Quebec. He said he didn't trust the new rep, said the last call with Brandon's team felt like being pitched by someone who'd Googled our name 10 minutes before the meeting. Mike's words, not mine. Then came the email from Todd over at Blueport Systems. Just a subject line in all caps. "They let you go." I didn't even open it at first. I didn't need to. These weren't just clients. They were relationships built over years, sometimes decades. They had my personal number, my trust, my time. And without a word, Northrise had tried to transplant all of it into a deck of generic strategy slides. That weekend, something changed. I'd thought walking away meant I could finally sleep. But now, I wasn't sleeping at all. Not because I missed the job, but because I couldn't stop thinking about the people being left behind. The junior account managers who were going to get blindsided when their top clients started pulling out. The clients themselves, people who had called me on holidays, trusted me with their business emergencies, sometimes even their family stories. And now, they were dealing with strangers in polished suits who didn't know a damn thing about how we'd survived the 2016 freight crisis or how we'd pivoted during COVID to keep shipments moving across provinces when warehouses were shut down. Brandon had no idea what he'd inherited, and even less idea what he'd lost. On Sunday night, my phone buzzed again. But this time, it wasn't a client. It was Brandon, the man who fired me. The text was short-clipped, but urgent. "Clayton, can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't respond. 5 minutes later, another ping. "I know this is unexpected, but it's important." Still, I said nothing. Because now I understood something he didn't. You can fire the face, the name, even the title. But you can't fire what people remember. And what they remembered was me. What I had built wasn't listed in the company assets. It wasn't in the branding guide. It wasn't even on the org chart. It was in the trust that a handful of business owners and decision makers had placed in me, one phone call, one problem, one emergency at a time. And Brandon. He was about to learn that some decisions don't just ripple, they rupture. I turned off the phone, and for the first time all week, I smiled. Not out of revenge. Not because I wanted him to fail, but because I finally saw what they couldn't erase. The truth is, they'd handed me a clean break, and the people who mattered were already coming with me. By Tuesday, the silence broke. Brandon didn't just text this time, he called twice. Then a third time from a different number. I let them all go to voicemail. I didn't need to hear his voice to know what it would sound like, that carefully practiced calm, masking the rising panic beneath. At 8:41 a.m., he sent another message. "Clayton, we need to talk. I'm under pressure here." Pressure. That word sat heavy on the screen. For 14 years, I had carried the weight of this company's pressure on my shoulders, traveling through blizzards, mediating client meltdowns, coaching rookies through last-minute contracts. And now, the guy who replaced me was feeling it. After just 10 days. By noon, I got an email this time from HR. Not Alicia, who I trusted, but someone new. Someone cold. It was titled Exit Process Follow-Up, but the body was all desperation. It read like they were trying to clarify the terms of my release. The subtext was clear: Brandon was bleeding, and the company was scrambling to tourniquet a wound they hadn't even acknowledged until now. Then something strange happened. Mike from Vector called again. But this time, he wasn't angry. He was amused. "You didn't hear?" he asked, barely holding back a chuckle. "Brandon tried to walk us through your old strategy pitch, word for word. He even tried using your story about the Banff deal. Forgot the name of the town halfway through." I didn't laugh. Not out of restraint, but because I felt something else creeping in. Pity. He wasn't ready. Not for the clients, not for the storms, and certainly not for the trust he thought came with the corner office. But this wasn't my fight anymore. At least, that's what I told myself. Until the headlines hit. It started with a leaked memo. Nothing scandalous at first, Just an internal update about client transitions and leadership realignment. But someone at the company, God bless them, attached the wrong file to the press release. Instead of a clean per draft, they sent the internal report, a brutal point-by-point breakdown of client dissatisfaction, dropping retention rates, and growing fears from key account managers that long-standing relationships are collapsing. My name wasn't in the file, but I didn't have to be. Everyone knew. And suddenly, the story shifted. I wasn't the quiet guy who got replaced. I was the steady hand who held it all together. I was the reason some of those clients had stuck around through a supply chain crisis and 2 CEO turnovers. Now, I was gone, and so was the confidence they once had. That evening, my phone lit up with a different kind of message from an old friend in corporate strategy at Branix Group. You free for lunch this week? Some of our board members want to talk off the record. I didn't respond right away, not because I wasn't interested, but because I needed to sit with it. In just 2 weeks, everything Brandon had tried to erase was bubbling back to the surface. Except now, it wasn't just about me. It was about the kind of leadership that leaves when the room is quiet, and the kind that stays when the storm hits. Brandon didn't know the difference, but the clients did, and soon the board would too. By Thursday, the calls from Northrise weren't just coming to me. They were coming to the clients, the partners, even some of the vendors, trying to plug leaks, salvage relationships, send gifts, fly reps out for damage control meetings. Too little. Too late. One of the younger reps sent me a message on LinkedIn. They're asking us to cold call your old clients. They're not picking up. Some are even hanging up after hearing the name Northrise. I stared at the message for a long time. Then finally, I picked up the phone. Not to call Brandon, but to call the first client who reached out to me after I left. Diane, I said, I've got an idea, but I won't do it alone. We met in a quiet corner booth of a diner just off Highway 1. No press, no suits. Just 2 coffees, the hum of traffic outside, and a list of names Diane slid across the table. Names of clients who were not renewing stalling negotiations, or in her words, waiting for something better. I didn't touch the list. I didn't have to. I already knew most of them by heart. She looked at me carefully, searching my face for the part of me that was still angry, still bitter. But it wasn't there. Not anymore. I'm not looking to burn them, I said softly. I just want to build something that can't be ripped away with a single signature. Diane nodded. So, what do you need from me? I told her the truth. I needed names. I needed trust. And I needed people who believed in relationships, not just numbers. She smiled. You'll have them by Friday. By the following week, I had 4 phone calls lined up, 3 former clients, and 1 venture capital contact from Toronto who had always said, if you ever go out on your own, call me first. I hadn't even announced anything yet, but word was spreading. I was no longer the guy they fired. I was the guy who might be starting something. And that it turned out was enough. 2 weeks later, in a co-working space downtown, I set down the first contract for a logistics tech startup with 3 clients and 0 brand recognition. It was raw, bare bones, and terrifying. But it was mine. The company didn't have a name yet, but it had a pulse, and it had purpose. Meanwhile, Northrise was spinning. They had issued 2 official press statements about their exciting leadership transformation, but the silence from major accounts was deafening. 2 high-profile contracts had shifted to monthly terms. One had left entirely. Brandon tried to plug the hole with PR, offering free audits and no-fee consulting, but clients weren't buying promises anymore. They wanted people, and people like me didn't come from LinkedIn ads. Then came the phone call. It was late afternoon. The sun was low, casting long shadows across my new workspace. I was alone writing a draft proposal when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I answered, "Clayton." The voice on the other end was cautious, like someone approaching a fire that hadn't quite gone out. "It's Jim Holt. I'm chair of the Northrise board." I sat up. We'd been following everything he said. The press, the numbers, the internal feedback. I didn't respond. "We made a mistake," he continued. "Brandon wasn't ready. We didn't see it then, but we see it now, and we'd like to talk about bringing you back in an executive role, possibly CEO." It was quiet for a beat. Then I let out the breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. "Jim, I appreciate the call." A pause. "But I'm not coming back." He sounded stunned. "May I ask why?" I looked around at the empty desks, the whiteboard full of scribbled names and ideas, the coffee cup still warm beside my laptop, because I'm already building what I should have been leading in the first place. There was silence on the other end. Then quietly Jim said, "Good luck, Clayton." I hung up and leaned back in my chair. Not with triumph, but with peace. This wasn't revenge. It was restoration. And it wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. It was about proving something to myself. That sometimes when the ground is ripped out from under you, it's only to force your feet to find firmer ground. It's strange how fast something small can grow. By the time the first snow dusted the sidewalks outside my new office, we had 6 clients, 9 contractors, and more inbound inquiries than I could handle alone. I was working 12-hour days again, but this time it felt different. This time every minute was mine. Every call wasn't just a transaction. It was a handshake, a shared risk, a mutual promise. There were no boardroom politics, no hollow mission statements, just people, trust, and an idea built from the very thing Northrise had tried to delete connection. One morning, as I was finishing a logistics outline for a new partner in Winnipeg, I got an email that stopped me mid-keystroke. Subject urgent, Northrise legal notice. I opened it, heart steady, inside a cease and desist letter. They were accusing us of poaching clients, violating non-compete terms, and using proprietary relationship strategies developed during my tenure. Proprietary relationship strategies. That was rich. The document was long, full of legalese and veiled threats, but one line stuck out. The recent loss of key clients and reputational damage suggests your continued influence poses a substantial risk to Northrise's commercial viability. They didn't say it outright, but that line told me everything. They weren't just afraid of losing clients. They were afraid of me. Afraid of what trust looks like when it's no longer bought, but earned. I forwarded the letter to my lawyer and went back to work. Later that evening, Diane stopped by the office with coffees. She looked around the place, half-assembled shelves, handwritten schedules, a corkboard full of ideas. Then she looked at me. "This," she said, "all of this, you built it from nothing." I shook my head. Not nothing. From the pieces they left behind. We sat for a while in silence, watching the city lights blink on through the windows. And I realized for the first time in a long time, I didn't miss the old job, or the title, or even the money. What I missed was meaning. And now I had it again. In the early days of my career, I used to think success looked like applause, awards, corner offices, golf invites. Now I knew better. Success is quiet. It's the sound of your phone buzzing, not with orders, but with thank yous. It's knowing your name is safe in someone else's mouth. That when they speak of you, they do it with respect. Not because they have to, but because they want to. Brandon's name disappeared from the Northrise website 2 months later. Rumors swirled. Board vote. Loss of confidence. Disruption to leadership continuity. But I didn't celebrate. Because by then, I was already too busy building the next version of what business could be. And every time I walked into the office, I didn't feel like a man who'd been cast aside. I felt like a man who had finally come home. So, if you're watching this wondering what comes after the fall, after the layoff, after the silence, let me tell you something. You don't have to burn bridges. You just have to stop crossing the ones that lead nowhere. And if you build with honesty, consistency, and heart, people will follow you across the ones that matter, even if it means leaving a shiny tower behind, even if it means starting over. Because sometimes what looks like the end of a career is just the beginning of a calling.